in Iowa.
That's sick.
Yeah.
I was looking at your on those like 100 on your website, like the 100 things you love, and you have some pretty cool music taste. I saw like the Fugazi live waiting room video that you have on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I started writing in grad school, I thought I was going to be some sort of music journalist. And then, I found adventure writing was way more accessible for me. So, yeah.
You could incorporate
let's talk about that, guys. We're live now. So,
we're live.
Yeah. See, just like that, we go live. We stay where we are and we zoom around the world. So, we're starting to get a little bit of audience here. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. I just want to just take a brief second before we get to the main event here with our Boulders session tonight. My name is Brad Wernson. I'm the founder of Boulders, and I've known Brendan for a long time. It's been great to know him and get to know him from a distance over the years. We were both early adopters on Twitter, and at the time we met through a blog that I was running for the rep agency I had called Pemba Serves. And Brendan, as he was coming up as a blogger, began writing, what did you write for us? Reviews, primarily, equipment reviews. That was super fun. And then we got to, I'm sorry.
I feel like I reviewed a headlamp. I think that was
a headlamp. And then we had a tweet up in Salt Lake at the Outdoor Industry Trade Show, and this guy shows up with all these long threads and just cut quite a figure. And so it's been fun to watch your career, Brendan, and close circles with you through mutual friends and acquaintance over the years. So I really appreciate you showing up tonight, and thanks for that. I'm just gonna let you guys get at it. I'm gonna disappear behind the scenes here, but thanks for showing up tonight and doing this for us, Brendan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Cool. Thank you, Brad. I am Max, part of the management team here at Boulders in Madison, Wisconsin. And this is our fourth Boulder session right now. Thank you all if you joined the other ones. If you haven't seen them, we have them on our Facebook page saved, so you can watch them in the future. Today, so every time we try to have like a local restaurant focus, and today we are working with Monty's Blue Plate Diner, which is like 3 blocks from my house. It's delicious. They have breakfast food, dinner food, good vegan options. And if you guys use the code ClimbMonty's, you can get 10% off today with them. And also our fundraising focus today is for the Food Bank of the Rockies, which Brendan picked. So it's a local food bank out in Denver supporting a big range of folks out there. And obviously there's a lot of people in need right now. So please donate to that. We have a donate link on our Facebook page, YouTube, the link in our Instagram, and then also on our Instagram story. Otherwise, super excited to introduce Brendan Leonard, author, essayist, humorist, illustrator, adventurer, ultramarathoner, all kinds of other exciting things. Brendan, what's up? It's good to have you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How you been?
I'm good. I'm just noting that my wife is actually outside working in the yard instead of watching this, so we don't have her for an audience. She chose to do other things.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. Is it still painfully hot there right now?
No, it's only 75 today, and it's mercifully cloudy because this office room gets really hot when it's super sunny. So we're good. We're in good shape.
That is like the perfect.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. She's watching. Okay.
Gave you the cursory thumbs up right there. So I think if you want, we could just start. So you were kind enough to offer to read from your latest book, Bears Don't Care About Your Problems. And if you're willing to, I think we would all love to hear some stories from that.
Yeah. Should I just start into it?
Yeah, that'd be perfect, man.
Awesome. So my blog will turn 10 next February, turned 9 in this February 2020. And I'd started gathering some of the sort of best of pieces of writing over the years, and I wanted to put them into a book, and Mountaineers Books said, hey, sure, we'll publish that. That sounds okay. So there's, God, I can't even remember. I think there's 80 essays in here. 80 out of 9 years, where I write every week. So that gives you an idea of how many were actually sort of hits.
Best of caliber.
Yeah. So I picked out three essays that I'm going to read, and I think I thought they were funny. a few other people thought they were funny too. One of them's not even the first one I'm going to read is not even my story. It's my friend Lee's story. And Lee is the guy who I was young one day. I met this guy and I was like really getting into sport climbing outdoors in Colorado. And he was, gosh, Lee almost 20? He's like 16 years older than me, I believe. That's right. And when I met him, I had never placed gear or anything. And he said, "Hey, do you want to learn how to trad climb?" And I said, "Sure, that would be awesome." And then he and I became, he taught me everything I needed to know about pretty much everything in mountaineering, trad climbing, whatever. We had a lot of really fun long days out there. And I paid him back years later when somebody approached me about writing a climbing guidebook. And I said, "Oh, that sounds like a horrible idea. I don't want to do that. But maybe my friend Lee, who also has a journalism degree from Colorado State University, but has never used it, would like to take on this project with me." And so we wrote this book called Classic Front Range Trad Climbs that sells literally dozens of copies a year. And we had a blast doing it. And I think that was probably the biggest benefit of the book. Yeah, we I think there's 40 routes in there between 5.4 and like 5.8 plus. So we got to revisit some of the stuff we'd done together and then go around and find some new stuff to put in there. And it is, it's not a high performer for me. We sort of like get royalty checks every 6 months and take a photo of them and text them to each other and laugh at how little that book made. And I mean, sometimes I complain about things that I do and I'm like, man, I could have made more money working at Subway, than writing this book or whatever. But that book was like, we maybe made 25 cents per hour at this point. So anyway, don't ever write a climbing guidebook. This is a story, I don't really need to set it up too much, but it's a story about that Lee told me. And in the story is Lee telling me the story. So I'm just going to get to it instead of running my mouth. How about that?
That sounds good.
So this is called The Greatest Mountaineering Survival Story Never Told. And in the book, I guess I can kind of hold it up so you can see it. There's an illustration of the dangers of mountain climbing: crevasses, rockfall, avalanches, frostbite, hypothermia, falls, lightning. And then on the far right is ham sandwiches, which will make sense in a minute here. Okay, so here's the story. A few years ago, I climbed Drift Peak near Leadville, Colorado on President's Day with my friend Aaron and my friend Lee. Lee had started up the peak a couple times before in the winter, but bailed for different reasons. He had promised that if we made it to the summit with him on what would be his first successful winter ascent of the peak, he'd tell me the story of how the mountain had almost killed him. I expected, of course, another story like the time he was climbing the northwest face of Torrey's Peak by himself in the winter, and a rock came screaming down the mountain, slamming into his foot and breaking 3 bones. That time he had to glissade down 800 feet, then use his ski poles as crutches to hike out the remaining 2.5 miles to his truck, and then drive home to Littleton, where he almost drove through the back wall of his garage because he couldn't get his smashed foot to engage the clutch in time. The Drift Peak story wasn't quite like that. As we descended the snowy ridge, I was quietly satisfied I had made the summit without throwing up, while Lee had the energy of the Kool-Aid man. He darted past Aaron and me, yelling, "Down, girls, it's time for a story." There he was, his story began, not too far away from where we were sitting, by himself on a cold December day in 2000. He was planning on climbing Fletcher Mountain, a half-mile further up past the summit of Drift Peak. He trudged up the snowy ridge, and at the point where the final summit slopes began, he came up on a notch in the ridge. He'd have to climb down a 40-foot slope, then back up a 60-foot slope to regain the ridge. The second slope was high angle and looked ripe for an avalanche. Instead, Lee turned around to go home and live to climb another day. The ridge, after all, is colloquially known as Villa Ridge, named after a man killed by an avalanche on it. Lee made his way back down the ridge and stopped on top of a large snow dome to eat lunch. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. He jammed the spike of his ice axe into the hard snow and tied his pack to it, anchoring it so it wouldn't slide away. He opened his pack and pulled from it his absolute favorite mountain lunch, a ham and cheese sandwich on whole wheat with mayonnaise and mustard. Munching on his sandwich, enjoying the view to the south of the Sawatch Range, Lee stopped breathing. He tried to cough, but nothing. His airway was completely blocked by a piece of sandwich. He hacked. Nothing. After 10 or so seconds of desperately trying to draw in some thin, 12,900 foot high air, he began to see a gray frame at the very edge of his vision. He realized he had wasted a lot of time. He had survived 35 years of pushing his limits in the big hills, including hundreds of pitches of roped climbing, that falling rock on Torrey's Peak, the occasional incompetent partner, stuck ropes, Rocky Mountain thunderstorms, and more, and he was about to be killed by a goddamn ham sandwich. His story in next year's accidents in North American mountaineering would be hard to frame as heroic. In 1974, American physician Henry J. Heimlich popularized a series of abdominal thrusts that came to be known as the Heimlich maneuver, a technique that has saved the lives of many humans who neglect to chew their food completely. The light bulb went on in Lee's oxygen-deprived brain, and he remembered the self-Heimlich technique, in which a choking person can Heimlich themselves by leaning over, say, the back of a restaurant chair and pushing it into their diaphragm. There are no chairs on the northwest ridge of Drift Peak. But what about wedging the spike of his ice axe against a rock, and driving the head of it against his abdomen? Lee looked around. Nothing but snow, which would just give way under his weight. He would have to glissade down the ridge to a talus field 40 feet away to find a large rock, if he could make it in time. The gray circle around his vision grew larger, and the tunnel of beautiful Colorado mountain scenery shrank. 60% vision now. He frantically fiddled with the knot attaching his ice axe to his pack. Come on, come on, come on. It came free. His pack shot down the slope in front of him. Still no air. Lee ripped the ice axe out of the snow and pushed himself into a butt slide down the slope. He planted the head of his ice axe underneath his rib cage, adze pointing right, pick pointing left. His chest sucked itself into a knot, starving for oxygen. He picked up speed, lifting his feet in the air so his crampon points didn't catch. His vision tunneled down to 25%. At the end of that tunnel was a rock shaped like the state of Tennessee, pointing straight up in the air, flat side facing Lee. His last thought was, I'm aiming for Memphis. Just before slamming into the rock, his vision went black. He passed out. Well, he assumes he passed out because he doesn't remember hitting anything. He woke up on his back, sucking in air in big gulps, holding a round ball of ham, cheese, mayo, mustard, and whole wheat bread in his mouth. He spat it out. Sorry, I still laugh at this every time. Everything hurt. Stomach, chest, back, shoulders. His hair hurt. The Tennessee-shaped rock sat 1.5 feet behind his head. The Rocky Mountains self-Heimlich had worked. As near as he could tell, the piece of sandwich had dislodged when his ice axe hit rock, and the head of the ice axe compressed his diaphragm. Or the ham bolus popped out of his throat when he flopped onto his back after doing a full somersault over the rock, while completely unconscious. Either way, 2 thoughts popped into his head. I could have died, but I didn't. Sitting at the same spot on the ridge 8 years later with Aaron and me, Lee closed his story saying, and I've never told anybody that story until now, because if my wife had found out, she never would have let me go climbing again. To which I replied, or eat ham sandwiches by yourself. If not for the unfortunate but amicable dissolution of Lee's marriage a few years ago, he may have taken that story to the grave, because in his journal for the day, he recorded it simply as an interesting day. That's
Oh my God. That is like shockingly harrowing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what would have happened when they found his body, you know?
Oh my God. I mean, I think the initial assumption is like, yeah, it's another, something terrible happened to an alpinist. And I don't know if they would ever discover the tragic and semi-embarrassing truth.
I know, this brave man who died eating a ham sandwich, for sure.
Oh my God, that's great.
Do you want me to just go through these, or do you have?
Yeah, man. Oh, we'd love more. Yeah, these are so good. Yeah. Do you want to hold the book up real quick, just so folks can see the
book?
How it looks like there.
Yeah. So I drew the cover, and it's just I actually traced somebody's chainsaw bear that they have on a photo on the internet, and gave the bear a sign. Bears don't care about your problems is going to be the last story I'll read, but the title comes from that story. Bears don't care about your problems. More funny shit in the woods from semirad.com. So this next one I read at book signings that I do for this book, and it's sort of awkward for a few minutes until people kind of get into it and realize it's sort of a joke. So I was working on a film project where a friend of mine, Ace Cavale, who's a longtime adventure photographer, he took his dog Genghis Khan on a 60-day backpacking trip. This was Ace's 60th birthday. And if I remember right, Genghis was right around 60 in dog years at the time too. But my friend Forrest and I were helping shoot. We were shooting the video that we eventually made into a film called Ace and the Desert Dog that toured with the Banff Festival and stuff like that. And Forrest that day he had his backpack probably weighed 65 pounds, full of lenses and stuff like that. But he's wearing these like really short shorts. And I started thinking about how sexy backpacking was because of Forrest's shorts, and had him jump up on this like sort of ledge. And I took a photo of him. And then I made the illustration for this. That's actually Forrest. I just traced the photo that I had taken of him with those shorts. But
I love the creeping left thigh there. He really,
yeah, for sure. Anyway, he like hammed it up for the camera, and later I think I was walking behind the two of them, and I was starting to type notes into my phone, which eventually became this. Like I think the next week. So I'll read the story now. It's called Backpacking is Sexy. Hey girl or guy, I want you to know something about that hobby of yours that you partake in from 2 to 200 days a year. It's sexy. Yes, I'm talking about backpacking. The way you suffer up a steep trail with 40 pounds of stuff in your backpack is hot, in the same sexy sports sort of way as beach volleyball or shirtless rock climbing. Yeah. It's in those odd-shaped sweat marks temporarily staining your synthetic fabric shirt when you take your backpack off for a break to drink water and eat room temperature snacks so you can backpack some more. What kind of sandwich is that you're unwrapping? I like peanut butter and jelly too, baby. Let's eat and keep backpacking all night long. Oh, you'd like to find a place to camp before night falls? I suppose that's a good idea. I just meant I like to take it slow. With you. Backpacking. Not like those people who trail run or mountain bike. No, baby, I like it at 3 miles per hour, or even 1 mile an hour if your particular trail gains more than 1,000 feet in a mile. Yeah. FYI, these sturdy yet sensual legs go all the way up to the point where my zip-off pants turn into shorts. Can I tell you something? I have a bit of a foot fetish, but only for feet bedazzled with fragments of dirt and patches of moleskin. Perhaps you would like to slowly remove the gaiters you're wearing with those hiking shorts and show me yours? I'm sorry, was that too forward? Maybe we could back up a little, to the part where I build you a roaring but not ostentatious campfire and read to you from my favorite USGS quadrangle map. While we sip from a very small bottle of whiskey I rationalized bringing, even though I spent the night before weighing all the items in my pack with a luggage scale. And then maybe I can get closer to you and your synthetic shirt that never quite loses that specific BO smell in its armpits, no matter how you washed it since your last hike. A sleeping bag that holds and beautifully blends the body smells of all your hard work on the trail, plus whatever happened in your digestive tract after we ate that freeze-dried Himalayan lentils meal from a bag the night before. I'm sorry, am I getting you a little hot? As hot as the back sweat you produce while hauling a 45-pound pack up a 2,000-foot climb? Or maybe as hot as the friction between your hips and a too tightly cinched waist belt on an old backpack? I thought that might be the case. I'll just leave this here and you can call me when you're ready to spend a weekend grunting and sweating with a relative stranger up a long, long trail that feels like it's never going to end. Just to be clear, I'm still talking about backpacking. Love, Tony B. Trail Magic. So that's that. It's a little.
Oof, that's risque. I love that. I love the BO smell that never quite leaves the armpits of your wicking shirt.
Yeah.
We had a question from someone. Did you write an article about the first time dating a backpacker and going on a mutual trip together?
No, one of the stories in here is I wrote like back in 2012, and it was think it's in here. Yeah, the rules for dating a dirtbag, which is like sort of one of the first pieces that sort of got my blog. It kind of went around the internet a little bit. And it was just pointing out all these ridiculous things we do. And yet, you know what? There is one in here about how to get your new boyfriend/girlfriend to hate your sport.
There you go.
Which is sort of based on watching couples fight at climbing crags or ski resorts or any of that. Generally, it's someone not remembering what it was like to be a beginner and then just telling their would-be spouse, like, just follow me, just do
skipping 40 steps, like, you're good. You're like, this seems dangerous. No, you're good. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out.
Do it. Just grab the hold. Just grab it. Just pull up. Yeah.
Did your friend appreciate the beautiful illustration of the embodiment of a backpacker after you wrote that story?
We're still friends, so
that's good. We appreciate it enough.
As far as got, I don't know that he commented on how beautiful it was or anything. But the original blog post, I actually just used the photo of him. He's wearing sunglasses, for like thick old school glacier glasses, so you can almost maybe not tell it's him unless you know who he is. So
a little incognito in the full regalia of his backpacking technical gear.
Yeah, so that was even more fun. Do you want me to read the last one?
I would love it. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
So, this one's called Bears Don't Care About Your Problems, which I think is always pertinent in most times that we're having. Think about what we're going through right now as a human race, and bears really they probably don't notice anything. They're probably just out there being like, normally we see some humans. We're not seeing very many humans now, but there's a chart that I drew that is, actually it's really hard to make out on this, but it says amount of problems you have, which is the red line that goes up and down over time, and the amount how much bears give a shit, and it's just flat at the bottom. So this is a short one, so I'll get to it. We made a trailer for the book because I told the publisher I would like, they didn't give me enough money to pay for the whole thing, but they were like, yeah, that sounds fine. So we made a little, I think it's like a 2-minute video where I rented the American Alpine or the American Mountaineering Center auditorium and just recorded it in an empty auditorium as if reading this was like this sort of scholarly thing. And we rented this bear costume, and I told my wife, Hillary, I said, well, I could just get my friend Jason to stand in the bear costume next to me while I'm reading it, and that could be fun. And she said, oh, no, I'll do it. And I was like, I mean, it's going to be hot and like whatever. And she said yes. And then we got the costume, and it was, it smelled pretty awful.
I bet from the last person, still some remnants of funk on it.
You think, I mean, they definitely clean all the costumes in between, but like how many Halloweens had this thing seen of like somebody like at a party, whatever happened in this bear costume. Anyway, she's standing in the bear costume, sort of nodding the whole time. But yeah, I'll read that. So if you ever want to hear this story read aloud again, it's on Vimeo. I think it's just called Bears Don't Care About Your Problems trailer. Okay. Bears don't care about your problems. Call your mom, tell your Twitter followers, or take a Sharpie and write them on the wall of a public restroom if you must. But bears certainly don't give a shit. Bears do not care how many likes your bikini selfie got on Instagram today. Bears do not care if the grocery store was out of your favorite almond milk. Even if you have slight anxiety because you haven't mowed your lawn in a while and it's more than ankle high, bears could not care less. Did you drop your phone and crack the screen? I know, again? Don't go looking for a bear to commiserate with you. Bears don't have phones or sympathy for humans who can't take care of nice things like the $700 computers we keep in our pockets. Bears do not care if you're not feeling motivated or if you're not happy at your job or if you are just so busy all the time now. Bears are busy too. Busy spending zero time wondering how you're doing out there in the non-wilderness parts of the world and instead focusing on their own survival, which is a little less trivial than the stuff you've been complaining about. Like you, bears have not been putting much money in their 401k, but bears don't have 401ks or any sort of money system or retirement. Sorry, can you hear that clicking? That's like Somebody's driving by with a really loud stereo.
Outside.
Bears don't want to hear about your new diet, what you're avoiding eating, or what you're only eating now, or how it makes you feel or not feel. You can eat rocks and die for all bears care. Bears are eating everything they goddamn can right now. And by the way, don't you think they're looking a little bit more athletic compared to last summer? Just kidding. When it comes to fucks bears give about what you think, the official total is 0. Bears are not arguing about politics with their uncles at awkward family get-togethers, on Facebook, or anywhere. Bears are not sitting in a Starbucks with their friend Christy telling her about what that toxic bitch Kim said to Jen about them last week, even though they hate drama and the only reason they're telling Christy is because she doesn't see Kim for who she is. Bears don't worry about gossip. Bears can run 30 miles per hour though, which is faster than Usain Bolt, for the record. Bears are out there doing their shit, being in the moment like we all talk about wishing we did a better job of. Bears are not meditating and trying to find their center. They are trying to find food, keeping track of their kids, and occasionally destroying other species that fuck with them. Then they sleep. Bears do not have time for your shit. Bears are, however, very interested in the food you bring into their habitat and do not have very good manners or really any perception of property rights. So if you're backpacking or camping in bear country this summer, make sure you use a bear canister or properly hang your food from a tree before you go to sleep at night. That's it.
That's so good. I love wrapping that into the whole time. I know it kind of like reminds me of that, the zenness of bears, but it's really just the physical necessity, whatever, which does really resonate right now, just kind of dropping whatever like baggage and extra shits in our heads right now, just to make sure we're doing the minimum we need to survive, kind of.
For sure.
That's awesome. Thank you for reading those. Those were incredible. Yeah. I'm gonna just pop some questions out here. So like, have you considered yourself like a writer first and foremost? Like, have you always been a writer? Was it something you kind of found later in life?
Since 7th grade, my geography teacher, Mr. Button, was who I've written about on my blog.
It's a great name too. I love that, Mr.
Yeah,
Button.
Jeff Button. He was a legend. I mean, just one of those teachers who was doing all this extra stuff, not getting paid for it, and not necessarily getting paid for it, and really, really reaching a number of students. But if you think back on your life and you think of like 3 teachers who made a difference through elementary school, through college, or graduate school or whatever, he was probably the first one and probably one of the most important. I goofed off a bit in his class, and some point he just said, "Hey, I do this school newspaper," which was at that time, well, probably always was, like pastel colored sheets of paper just stapled together. He was putting it together on a Mac, like an Apple IIe. No, I didn't know what it was, but it was like, anyway, he said, "You should write a column for the student newspaper." So that was my first experience, sort of just like trying to write funny things for a quote unquote audience. And then I forgot about it for years until I got to college and was trying to figure out what to major in. I had 5 different majors, and I was finally settled on marketing and was going to graduate in a year. And I saw an ad in the student newspaper, Northern Iowa Today. Is that right? Yeah. Where they were looking for a columnist, and it was like they paid like, I don't know, it was some really minuscule amount, but they were like, you could be the columnist who, I think my column showed up on Tuesdays or Thursdays, but it's a weekly blog, and my picture was in the newspaper, and this is before blogs, before social media or anything. And I'd write these things that I thought were really funny, and a few times throughout the year, people would actually see me on campus or at a bar and say, "Hey, I read your column. I thought it was funny." So I had this feedback, and I thought, oh, this could be really fun. And one of my professors had a column in the local newspaper, which it's like 100,000 population metro area. So the circulation was probably at that time, I don't know, 40,000 or whatever. And I said, I was talking to him one day, and I go, "I think I want to do what you do. I want to be a columnist." And he kind of goes, "Oh, that's not like a full-time job. They give me like $100 for that." And I was like, oh, that's a huge bummer. But I I took that column experience and then decided to go to graduate school, and I went to the University of Montana and got a master's degree in journalism, and then tried to pursue that for years. So worked at a couple newspapers, didn't really work out too well. Was trying to write about adventure the whole time, from the minute from my last semester in graduate school, actually. In my first year as a freelance, my first year freelance income was $40. The next year it was, I want to say 150 or 100. And the next year I think I made like 2,000. Then I finally, after about 8 years of trying, I started to make some headway and get like bylines in like Climbing Magazine and Backpacker and stuff. And I started my blog, which sort of helps things take off. So yeah, I guess so. That's a long way of getting to that. But now I do a lot of illustration sort of things. And then I directed or co-directed a number of short adventure films. But to me, it always makes sense. The writing, it comes first. That's how I tell stories. And then you're able to wrap visuals around that. Or, like I'm not an artist. The things I do involve words or use words to be funny. If I didn't have words next to them, they wouldn't make sense. So I guess I'm like a writer who doodles a little bit and tries to make that work, tries to reach people that way.
Incorporate some visuals. Yeah, that's awesome. I like that it's kind of cool that the whole story starts with a teacher too. So shout out to teachers out there right now who I know going through some tough things. Has your process changed at all during quarantine? Like, do you still feel creative, or have you had like any loss in focus or anything?
I mean, I've been doing I do a weekly blog post, and then I do another weekly collection of like fun things I find on the internet every Friday for my email list. And I don't know how much people are setting their watch by that thing, but that's my personal deadline. So I just keep going. And I guess the thing that's changed is that I'm trying to make things that I think people might need now, as opposed to just like cracking jokes. Because I think we're all kind of going through this thing together, literally around the world. And my stuff may not be relevant to 90% of the population, but I hope the people it does reach, I hope it helps them get through it. So it's things about, like, most recently I've been writing about anxiety, the idea of running a race when there's no finish line, which is kind of what it feels like we're all doing until we get some sort of news of like a vaccine or something like that. And then today I wrote about washing dishes as one of those small things that you can do to, make.
Just kind of like celebrating the mundane a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Take care of something you can control, I guess, at this point, even though you can't control anything. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You just got to kind of keep on hammering on, I guess. That's good. Good to know that you're still kind of grinding out, finding the inspiration. We're getting a bunch of questions coming in here. I'm just going to kind of fire some off. How's the mission to visit all the diners in Denver going? And what's your go-to breakfast meal?
Oh man, my favorite diner here just closed permanently.
Damn, that sucks.
A buddy and I did that. We bicycled to, I think it was a dozen diners over the course of a year, and it was like more of an excuse just to hang out. But yeah, it was wonderful. I love diners. Go-to breakfast. The Universal is my favorite restaurant in Denver, and they have this. Well, there's like 3 things on the menu I eat there, but it's the best breakfast in Denver, and I really hope they reopen. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, whatever. I'll find something anywhere with a bunch of coffee.
Yeah, I really do miss like 4 friends going to a diner in the morning and just munching out, hanging out. That's a thing I didn't think I would miss, but I really do.
Oh man, yeah.
We had another question. How are you figuring out like where, what, when, if to plan your next adventure during this time where everything's kind of shut down right now?
Oh yeah, I kind of go back to this joke it's too dirty to actually say, but it's the old bull and the young bull. And essentially the joke is about the old bull realizing that we have time, and I kind of think that way. Like, instead of dwelling on the things I can't do this year, I have a few ideas that maybe they'll happen next year. That's cool. but also I get to look back and be like, I mean, I grew up in a really small town in Iowa. If I had told my guidance counselor that I wanted to be an adventure writer when I grew up, he'd be like, geez, I don't actually know if that's a job or you can do that. So some of the things I've gotten to do, it's just amazing. And if I got cut off right now, I could be happy with that. If I was just like, okay, that's over. It's been a good life. So I think that way, I guess. But yeah, I'm still looking at maps and poking around a little bit and being like, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to be a year older when I get to do that thing. So it's tough though for a lot of people.
Great way to look at it. I guess you have no excuses not to plan perfectly, I guess, too, for the next one. So you got all the time in the world to really make sure.
Yeah. I had a lady write me and say that she was planning to hike the PCT this year and had to call it off, of course, and instead was working as an EMT. So instead of hiking the PCT, she was doing these like 10-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts of like intubating people with COVID. And I mean, that sort of thing really gives you some perspective, how her life just changed and like, well, what are my options here? Okay, I got to work. And, it went from like vacation time to like really, really intense stuff. So it was an incredible note to get from somebody and be like, okay, yeah, let's put this in perspective. So
yeah, really exactly. Perspective and context really means the world right now. Isabel Brower said that she loved your blog post last week, Running with No Finish Line. Sent it to all her best buds, and it resonated for everybody.
Oh, thanks.
That's really nice. Couple questions about your how to run 100 miles. Did you expect that to be like really inspiring for people, or was it just kind of a personal piece that you wrote?
So I wanted to make a film about my friend Jason, who I met bartending at an Applebee's in Cedar Falls, Iowa in 2000. So we've been friends for 20 years now. And he and I always tried to tell his story a little bit because he's grew up in a sort of broken home, poverty, was dyslexic, was bullied because he was dyslexic, and then one day decided to start fighting back. Had all these interesting things about him, like he had lost every wrestling match the first, I think, 1.5 or 2 years that he went out for wrestling in junior high and high school, and then finally started winning. So he's always been just a huge inspiration to me, just the way he's lived his life and his outlook on life. And he and I sort of started doing ultra marathons together in 2015. So just working our way up the distances, like 50K. We actually did the Ice Age 50 in Wisconsin. 2016 was that? Yeah. And then we decided, hey, let's try to run a 100-mile race. Let's see how this goes, and let's pick one that's hard and try to do it. And at that time, I had been doing a lot of filmmaking and learning how to edit video and shoot a little bit. And I thought this is a perfect way to tell his story, So, and there's just such a parallel there with just the idea of persistence, and that's how he's gotten everything in his life. And then the idea of trying to finish a 100-mile race. So I don't think I wanted to be in it on camera at all, but I think it became clear that I sort of had to be. So yeah, I wanted to inspire people. I just wanted to share. It's like if you have a person in your life you're always telling people about, like, oh, you should meet my friend, you'd really like him because of this. It's like that, but with a film, you can take that times several thousand people, hopefully, or several hundred or whatever. In that case, it's been viewed on YouTube like millions of times now. So I get to share that friend with all those people. So yeah, I hoped it would inspire people. And the thing about ultra marathons is you get to the starting line and there's like these really fast people up at the front, who are like, yeah, they're going to finish in the top 10 or top 20. But the back 80% of it is just like regular folks like us, and like just with a screw loose, that, hey, we're just going to try to do this. And the more you look around and go, wow, everybody here looks really normal, like like we could just be a softball team, but we're doing this. And but to show that normal people can do those things was a big deal for me. So that thing that killed me. I'd never run 100 miles before, and I also had never directed and produced a film project that big. So I was doing them both at the same time, and really hard to focus on both.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah. So I've done a couple 100-mile races after that, and it's so nice to not worry about if we're getting the shot or if we're, whatever. It's great.
Yeah, it's kind of cruel to have to be like directing while you're running 100 miles at the same time.
Yeah, it's horrible.
What have you found to be like the most difficult thing about ultra marathoning?
I guess like the last I think it's the last 20% of any distance really sucks for me. Like, doesn't matter, just get miserable. But I think it's kind of the time of my life where I just enjoy that sort of getting away for 2 to 4 to 8 hours, however long you're doing like a training run for, which is great for me. Like I don't take my phone. I don't listen to music. If I do take my phone, it's on airplane mode. So it's like there for photos or whatever. But I really, there's no other way that I avoid my phone or email for that long. So I just go out and flog myself in the mountains or whatever. It's pretty fun. But yeah, I don't know. I generally don't have like problems with blisters, hardly any digestive troubles. I'm not very fast though. I wonder if I went faster, if I would have more problems. But yeah, I don't know. It's a mental battle, but I guess it's one of those things you just like tell yourself it's worth it. And I don't know. I imagine people go through similar emotions during childbirth, where it's like this, I'm never doing this again. This is horrible. This hurts so much. And then, they have a kid, and then like, several months later, they're like, yeah, I could do that again. That was the thing.
You like remember it fondly. You remember your race fondly, but when you're in it, you're like, what the hell did I do?
Yeah. Or it's worth it in some way for sure.
Does it come from like, do you consider yourself like competitive at all? Like to, all these like challenges you take on? Is this just kind of like for the joy of the experience?
Yeah. I mean, I don't compete with other people much because that would be very depressing because I'm not very, I'm not that good at things. So, but I think that sort of challenges sort of offer you a way to compete with yourself. And I guess I'm a big fan of learning by trying things. So I view it as something like that, I guess. Like, well, I'll see if I'd like to go out and see if I could be one of those people who, does a 100-mile race, because there's literally thousands of them. So they can't be that unique, right, in their outlook or pain tolerance or whatever it is. So I guess that's I'm not competing with those people. And I also don't think like ultra running culture is that competitive for most people. Yes, the people who are like up at the top for sure, but mostly I've heard it described as if you fall down in a marathon, people will run past you because that's one less person they have to beat. But if you fall down in an ultra marathon, people stop and ask if you're okay. And that may also have to do with the wilderness venue for most of the places, because you could die if I just leave you out here, so I'll stop and help. But
that's cool. That's cool to hear. Like that's really humanizing. Like as someone, I'm just really not familiar with that world, and I would imagine it was like this thing that was exponentially more competitive than marathoners or something. But that makes sense that it's just a bunch of people kind of pushing themselves to do something wild.
Yeah, and I think the loudest applause at a lot of races is the person who comes in last just before the cutoff.
That's
and
sick.
I think that says a lot, but also the races are just not decided by seconds, or minutes a lot of times. So yeah, I mean, I don't line up with like 300 other people and think, okay, I got to get 257th out of, I don't know.
It's kind of very, very esoteric goal,
Yeah.
Someone asked you any interest in doing a 200-mile race ever?
I have a really hard time with the last 100-mile race I did. I just kept hearing I talked to my friend Sean, who runs Gear Junkie, the website, the year before, about I think he did the Leadville 100, and I said, how'd it go? And he said, I don't know if I need to run 100 miles again in my life. Kept hearing that for the 8 hours it took me to get through the last, like, whatever, 30 miles. I just was like trying not to fall asleep and just in, all the pain you're in, and just like, I don't know if I need to do this again. So 200, I think, is probably out. I don't know. I'm not that psyched on it, to be honest.
It becomes a little more like masochistic and less pleasurable probably at that point.
Yeah, I think so. I was always curious if I could do the 100, and I've never looked at the 200 and gone, I wonder if I could do that. I'm just kind of like, nah.
You gotta put a ceiling on cool stuff at some point. Like, that's very impressive. Running 100 miles is very impressive. Someone wants to know do you still have the $200 bike that your buddy bought you because he wanted someone to cycle with?
No, I broke the weld on the down tube in the bottom bracket, like within, it was like 2 or 3 years. I think I was just trying to work it pretty hard. I would pedal rather aggressively around the city and like start off at stoplights really hard, and eventually the weld just snapped, like broke on the bottom. So I just had to get a new bike. So yeah, I did buy a $100 bike a couple of years later and ride across America just because I thought it was a Raleigh Team USA, and I thought, oh, this is meant to be. And I didn't realize how heavy it was and how stupid that was for 3,000 miles. But yeah, I have $100, and that bike.
Cool to know you can do it though. I like that you don't need a super techie bike to be able to do.
Oh, if you get out there, when you start running into people, you'd be so shocked at what people are riding. Like, oh yeah, I heard of someone who had rode a Walmart bike down the entire Pacific coast and only purchased things at Walmart to like ride the entire thing. I've never corroborated that to see if it's like true, but I imagine it's, if you're only riding like 25 miles a day, it's probably fine.
You can handle that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The ground. We're getting a handful of comments here about your story, 60 meters to anywhere, where you kind of talk about like your personal journey, using like outdoor spaces and climbing particularly to aid your path to recovery. A lot of good support from folks right now, but like what about that kind of like outdoor adventure or climbing like really sort of lent itself to like your recovery process?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's that's this book. So yeah, when I was 23, I went to rehab for alcoholism, substance abuse, mandated by the state of Iowa. It was either rehab or you can go to jail for 6 months. So I chose rehab, which has changed my life. So that was 2002. And I kind of was a little bit lost figuring out what to do with my time or my life, or like who I was in the 2-3 years following that. They kind of give you the tools you need to not do the harmful thing, which is the substance abuse. But I didn't find that many stories of people doing really cool things after that. And I started getting a little bit more into the outdoors. I moved to Montana to go to grad school, started hiking, started sort of peak bagging, but was really not interested in rock climbing. And then I got a job at the REI in Phoenix because I couldn't get a job with my master's degree in journalism. Like no newspaper wanted to hire somebody with a master's degree and not a lot of experience. So I was like, did some day labor jobs for a little while. Then finally REI asked me, I applied there and they let me do a sales job on the floor. And the guys there the guys I worked with were always saying I should come rock climbing with them. And I was like, nah, it's fine. I'm good. And then my brother, who lives in Racine, Wisconsin, he had started doing some climbing and bought a rope. And then I was like, I think he'd had it for maybe a year or so. I was kind of like, I'm not going to take this thing up to Devil's Lake. And he just threw it in a box for Christmas and gave it to me. And I got this climbing rope and I was like, okay, cool. And I went back to work at REI and they said, my coworker said, great, you can climb with us now. And so I tried to learn, didn't really take to it at first. I was terrified of heights and didn't listen to them and didn't breathe, didn't use my feet, didn't trust my feet, tried to use my hands. was horrible at it. But eventually I learned to climb, and then it just became this thing that was like, it provided, I guess, the way to shut off my brain that I hadn't had that since I had sat down on a bar stool last and, knocked down whatever, 10 beers or whatever, where it was just this being in the moment of you really can't lose focus because you have to hang on. So I learned to climb outdoors in Colorado and spent, I guess, God, that would have been 2006. It's been a good 7 years just traveling around the West and doing tons of climbing here. Even some in Europe and stuff like that. And it was like my thing for quite a while. And that story is this book, 60 Meters to Anywhere, how I sort of dealt with that by finding something else. And I read a bunch of different addiction memoirs when I was trying to figure out how to write about it. And every one I read seemed to focus on actually just the experience of being in rehab, or all the fucked up shit you did before you went to rehab, and then that was the end, and then you escaped it. But nobody was like, hey, I found this other thing that enabled me to live this sort of amazing life and find an identity, because it was the first sort of identity I had really had. So I was young when I'd meet people at a dinner party, and they would say, what do you do for a living? I was like, I don't know. I work for this newspaper that nobody reads. You're not really happy about it. But when I found climbing, I was like, what I really want to talk to you about is climbing, because this is my thing. So yeah, it's, I think a lot of people who have substance abuse issues are looking for something like that when they get control of, or to help get control of what they're doing, another way to be in the world and identify. And it worked for me. I can't say that I would prescribe it, but if it works for other people, that's great too. So
yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's really well put. I have family and friends in recovery, and I know so much of it is you can get stuck in this cycle of just self-abuse, thinking about things you've done in the past and feeling like you lost a part of yourself when you got sober. And there's not a lot of futurists, looking ahead. And I've heard from a lot of friends climbing specifically, covers it's meditative, it's social, you have a built-in healthy community. It's scary as shit sometimes. It gets you, you can it's a healthier way to find highs too.
Yeah,
I think it resonates with a lot of people in recovery, which is awesome.
For sure.
Pivoting, natural pivot here. Watch this segue. How was Matthew Peterson? He asked, how has the burritos a week and cups of coffee a week equations evolved since you moved out of the Aerostar?
Oh, I was an Astrovan.
Astrovan.
Yeah. Yeah, I drink just as much coffee. Burritos I'm doing a little bit less of at this point, because you got to leave the house to go.
Get a proper burrito.
I mean, I would say the passion is still there for sure. But yeah, I enjoy not living in a van now. It's pretty great. I recommend it, but I'm pretty psyched to not be in a van.
How many years were you in a van?
Just under 3 years, 2 years, and actually the first 8 months I was in a Subaru Outback Impreza, which is a small car. So yeah, my van is still in Denver. I see it every once in a while. Some folks are living in it. So it's got a paint job now with flames on the hood and stuff like that I had a friend do right before I got rid of it, maybe 6 months before I got rid of it. So it's very recognizable. I just saw it when I was out running the other day. So
yeah, it's kind of a trip that climbing, I mean, with the grass is always greener type thing, so many climbers, I know, young professionals that make a lot of money and they've talked to their family and friends and man, I would love to just buy a $7,000 Sprinter. And it's just it's a strange thing that I feel a lot of climbers align with a lot, but other people are why? I don't understand the allure of the lifestyle.
Yeah, there aren't that many sports where you live in your car and it's cool.
That's cool. Yeah, that's super cool.
If you're psyched on golf and you live in your car, it's probably less acceptable. Or basketball, I don't know. Yeah, it's awesome though. I mean, I think yeah, it's great experience. I can't say anything about it. You should do it. Quit your job. Do it.
Yeah. Sorry, Brad. Hopping the van out of here. Do you have a favorite author or like a really formative author that kind of affected your style?
I used to think I was like a huge Hemingway fan, and then I reread Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut a couple of years ago and thought, oh wow, this is it. This is where it came from. Because I read a bunch of his books when I was like, in college, just on my own, not for classes or anything. Just sat down on the porch and read. And Vonnegut's a hero in so many different ways. Right now, like
my favorite too. I love that answer.
Really psyched on this book right now. Brian Doyle, One Long River of Song. I think I bought several copies for friends, but it is super inspiring. The guy's sense of wonder that he has on everything just informs all of his essays, and I would say it's influencing me right now, just because of the hope it provides, and his style is really accessible, I would say, but still extremely well crafted. I mean, I would like to buy a copy of that for everyone who is alive on the planet right now.
Oh, dude, that's great. It's always incredible when you read a book and you're like, this person is an author, like when you like reread passages and it just like makes your heart weep. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? I've like personally, I've been kind of struggling like reading heavy books right now. Like at the start of quarantine, I was like amped up on like really heavy stuff, and then I was just kind of struggling. But I've been reading like a lot of like travelogues and stuff, and kind of similar stuff like what you do. Do you have like a go-to author that's like an adventure author or travelogue writer that you really enjoy?
Oh boy. The best adventure book I've read in recent memory is a book called The Sun is a Compass. I'm like looking for it on our shelves over here. And now I can't remember the lady who's the author, but essentially Carolyn something. She and her husband live in Alaska, but they decide they're going to travel from essentially, I think, Vancouver to the Arctic Ocean, and then to basically the western edge of Alaska on foot, on skis, and on pack rafts. And somebody sent it to me, and I was like, oh, I'll get to that. And it was sat here for like 5 months before I actually started it. And it's an incredible book. Wonderful, just the scenes, like just the experience itself is so incredible. But she's a great writer. She's a biologist, so she's super into birds. And I'm not super into birds, but I found the whole thing incredible writing. Great adventure book. And then I just recently read this book called Dishwasher by Pete Jordan, because I was writing about washing dishes, and this guy's goal was to wash dishes professionally in all 50 states. And I was halfway through it he's like on an oil rig in Louisiana washing dishes. And I thought, this is actually one of the best adventure books.
That is an incredible concept.
Yeah, just from his travels. I mean, he's like he's a horrible employee. He just like quits whenever he wants to. He's like, I worked there a week, I'm done. I was just not feeling it, so I didn't go in. But he travels to 30 some states and washes dishes, like ski resorts, like a fish cannery in Alaska, a train. It's fascinating stuff. So
I think that's an important job for everyone to have too. Like if you've never been to a dish pit, I think everyone should have to experience that for like a period of their life.
For sure. That was my first job too. So there was definitely some great reminiscing about that, about being young and dumb and listening to Pearl Jam.
Yeah, just jamming out. I remember my favorite thing, dishwashing. I worked at like a fancy Italian restaurant, dishwashed, and I would get like leftover tiramisu that was kind of like half eaten, just go to town with it.
Oh, you would love this book. It's like I ripped through it in like literally 30 hours because I was just reading it on a Kindle and was like, this is so fun. It's such an easy read, but he's actually a really good writer. you would think, okay, this could just be, like somebody's diary, but it's not. He does a good job. He actually created a zine, a dishwashing zine that I think he did like 14 issues or something like that, but that became this sort of big thing and sort of got noticed by a few, media outlets. He actually went on Letterman
Wow.
because of this quest to wash dishes.
Was it like a socioeconomic, expose or anything, or is it all just like pretty lighthearted?
Oh no, it's just like it explores the occupation. I mean, he talks about different famous people who have written about dishwashing or have been dishwashers. The beginning of the book, he talks about George Orwell writing about being a dishwasher in Paris. Wow. Yeah, like it's pretty fascinating. He got pretty deep into it. So yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. I'm gonna get those 3 recommendations. Was it Dishwasher, One Long River of Song by Brian Doyle, right?
Yeah.
And The Sun is a Compass.
This is great.
Sick.
Hearing something. Sorry. I don't know where it is. We have a lot of books in here and I can't find it.
Well, it's 8 o'clock, so I guess we can wrap. I could talk to you for like 3 hours. It's been really very, very pleasant. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for the aspiring adventurer author that you can impart at all?
Oh boy. I do a writing course on River Trip that hopefully we'll still be able to do it this September on the Rogue River in Oregon. I think the biggest message that I give anyone is not about how to do it, but just to give yourself permission to do it. I'm a big fan of trying, learning by trying and sucking for a long time, and then learning to get better by sucking. So yeah, I think don't wait for someone to publish your work. Just try to do it and put it out there. Make it for other people and see how it goes. And if you get 5 people to read your stuff, that's pretty great. It's not the New York Times or the New Yorker, but I mean, it's something. So yeah, I don't know that any writer is probably like super satisfied with their work they did 5 years ago. So you're always going to be improving. So you might as well just get started trying at this point. I guess that'd be my advice. I don't know.
That's great. That's perfect.
Yeah.
It's a perfect amount of optimism. Well, sweet. Thank you, Brendan. If you guys have not gotten any of his books, you should. I'm going to actually grab a couple of your books too, I think. I'm going to go on a little book buying spree right now.
Don't do that. You're going to have this pile now.
Online shopping, man. I can't stop doing it right now, but online shopping for books, you at least feel a little bit like more noble about it,
Yeah.
But your books are available at your website, semirad.com/books, right?
Yeah. And people ask like, where's the best place to buy them? And I always say, just buy it from the bookstore you don't want to close. So our local bookstore here, Tattered Cover, is having a hard time keeping up with orders, as I understand it, because they can only have a couple people in the building. But I've been ordering all my books there just to keep their doors open, because I love bookstores, because I love books.
Oh yeah, I love, smelling books too. I'm kind of obsessed with like just smelling books as I go through. Walking into a bookstore, oof, it's gonna be another thing to appreciate after all of this is over.
Yeah.
Also, he has a Patreon. You guys can support him on Patreon too if you like his stuff. Follow his Instagram at @semi_rad. And then next week too, so a shout out here before we close out. Next week we have Megan Martin on, accomplished professional climber and American Ninja Warrior superstar. Super psyched for that one. Otherwise, Brendan, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. And take care of yourself, take care of your family, and I hope you get out and start adventuring again soon.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Max.
Cool. Take care.
Thank you.